Tonight, the people of James Smith Cree Nation catch their breath after a heart-pounding afternoon. Was the subject of a police manhunt back?
Okay, we just got it. We have to go inside, everybody. We just got a real community warning. We got to go inside.
A frightening false alarm just 2 days after at least 10 were slaughtered.
I witnessed loved ones laying lifeless in my community. I've seen a lot of trauma.
How victims are being remembered, what we know about the wounded. And what police are saying with Myles Sanderson still on the loose.
We have no idea what means he has at his disposal.
The urgent question tonight, how did he evade the system in the first place?
People want to know, how did this happen and what do we need to change?
This is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thank you for being with us. We are in Weldon, Saskatchewan tonight. We're not that far from James Smith Cree Nation, where there is grief and certainly growing anxiety after another emergency alert and lockdown, but still no sign of the suspect in one of Canada's deadliest mass killings. This was the road into the First Nation today. Police raced in and people scrambled for shelter after reports Myles Sanderson was spotted nearby, but an hours-long search turned up no leads at all. And tonight, police say the focus may be shifting away from Regina as they hunt the man wanted in the attacks that left 10 dead and 10 others still in hospital tonight, 3 in critical condition. Our Aaron Collins was invited into the community this morning. So, Aaron, can you take us through what happened?
Yeah, we were invited into the community to speak to some of the residents, and so we went there, but things really didn't go as planned.
Richard Britton calls himself a warrior for his community, someone who cares for friends, neighbors,
Thank you, my little buddy.
even stray dogs. Close to those attacked Sunday morning and their families, he brought us to his home to share their stories. But this story is unfolding.
I'm scared.
Okay, we just got it. We have to go inside, everybody.
Hey, can you each grab one thing? As we visit another emergency alert.
Something bad is inspiring right now.
A report that Myles Sanderson is nearby.
Come on, come on. This is a community warning.
A community already traumatized, locked down again. This community on edge, more hours inside, waiting for word, watching police search their community again. This time, it was a false alarm, but the fear is real.
It doesn't feel good to be told that you can't go anywhere and not to feel safe. Like, and to have people that are scared around you, like what we experience in my home, like it gives you a headache. It puts a lot of stress on the people, and you know, a lot of people want to get back to feeling again and being on the land, being somewhere, going places.
For now, people here are stuck, grieving for the lost, hoping for those clinging to life, waiting to move forward, to start to heal.
As friends,
It's what Richard brought us here to talk about.
I feel that we need to start gathering together. We need to start reaching out to each and everybody in these homes and offering them food, seeing what they need. Because, you know, a lot of people are sheltered with the grief, with the trauma and the worry and the stress and the sadness.
But amidst that sadness, understanding, even compassion for those that delivered it.
We as First Nations, we know that our spirit is connected with us, and when we reach out, when we're hurting and we're in anger and rage, and you know, we reach out for alcohol, we reach out for substances. We don't reach out for our ceremonies, our traditional ways that are going to heal us, truly heal us. They reach out for drugs, alcohol, and your spirit steps away from you, and then you become something else. You become somebody else, you become something else. That's the true effect of drugs that has on a young person and people in my community.
This story ongoing, our visit interrupted by the lingering crisis here, one met with courage and compassion. I want to say thank you very much for taking care of us today.
Greatly appreciated to take care of you guys and to have you in our home, to feel what we go through out here in our community at this time. Thank you for coming.
Aaron, what an extraordinary experience for everybody there. What happened after the lockdown ended?
Yeah, Adrienne, as soon as the lockdown ended, the people who'd been hosting us, they hit the road. They were on their way to Saskatoon to be closer to family who was injured in Sunday's attack and are still in hospital there.
All right, Aaron Collins, thanks to you and Corey and the team. Appreciate that. With the manhunt still on, we take you now from James Smith Cree Nation, around 300 kilometers south to Regina, where police searching for Myles Sanderson gave a major update tonight. Sam Sampson is there. So Sam, walk us through what they said.
Well, Adrienne, based on what we heard from RCMP and Regina Police, instead of narrowing down the search, it seems to be getting wider.
We're not sure of his whereabouts at this time. We're not back at square one.
But no suspect in custody. Day 3 of Myles Sanderson still on the run. After the false alarm in James Smith Cree Nation Tuesday afternoon, RCMP say they're still looking for information. Any information.
And sometimes that information leads to something important, and sometimes it's determined not to be credible. So, but in the meantime, we appreciate individuals providing us that information.
But tonight, a significant update from Regina Police.
Today, we've received information that is leading us to believe he may no longer be in this community. As a result, investigations continue, and although we don't know his whereabouts, we are still looking not only within the city of Regina, but expanded into the province as well.
The last possible sighting of Myles Sanderson police are working with was on this street, Arcola Avenue in East Regina. That tip is now more than 48 hours old.
It was credible information that was provided on Sunday that was supported by additional pieces of information that we received. So at this point in time, while we can't say with any certainty that he is still here, we can't say with any certainty that he is not.
RCMP say they still think Sanderson was in a black Nissan Rogue like this one in Regina on Sunday. The tip had 2 people in the car. Police don't know who that is, and they say they don't have any new suspects. They also think Sanderson may be hurt, but still dangerous.
We have no idea what means he has at his disposal, but he has shown that he is willing to kill people.
Premier Scott Moe told reporters that once the man is in custody, it's time to talk about safety.
There may be a broader conversation as we move forward as to, rural and remote policing in the province to ensure that we are doing the very best by the people that we are serving.
So while police may not be back at square one in their investigation, people here in Regina continue to wonder, is there a killer on the loose?
Well, that's no surprise at all, Sam. If police have information that he may not be in the city, but then they're not ruling Regina out, what does that mean for the city right now?
Well, Adrienne, the police chief here in Regina stressed that just because, you may not be seeing investigators in uniform on the streets, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There are plainclothes officers who are doing analysis and using technology to try and find where Myles Sanderson is. But still, some places are beefing up their own security. The University of Regina, for example, has increased their campus security, and they say they are in close contact with the Regina Police Service. Now, this is the Tuesday after a holiday. Monday, people are going back to work. Kids went back to school today. All of this while we are maybe heading into day 4 of not knowing where Myles Sanderson is. Adrienne?
All right, Sam Sampson in Regina, thank you. The Saskatchewan Health Authority confirmed today how many victims are still being treated. So as of this afternoon, only 10 patients remained in hospital. 3 are in critical condition. 7 are listed as stable. Another 7 people injured in the stabbings have been discharged since Sunday. Ellen Morrow has been learning more about some of those who were killed in the attack.
Well, Adrienne, this community has asked for privacy, to mourn, to try to process this horror. So there is still so much we don't know about the victims, but the stories that are emerging are of heroes and helpers who will be deeply missed.
Earl Burns Sr. was a grandfather and a veteran of the Princess Patricia Light Infantry. The Saskatchewan First Nations Veterans Association sent condolences to his family. On that tribute post, a friend of Burns commented, "We sure teased each other about our hockey teams. Going to miss his humor and friendship." Lana Head was a mother of 5, beloved by so many in her community. One Facebook friend wrote, "My heart aches and I can't stop crying. Such a beautiful soul. Rest in peace, my friend." Another posted, "Still reeling, in total disbelief you were taken from this world in that horror. I will miss our chats." Police believe some of the victims may have been targeted, while others were attacked at random. Gloria Burns was part of the community's crisis team, responding to an emergency call, her family says, when she was killed. "I can't believe you're gone," a friend posted online. "You will be dearly missed, and it was an honor knowing you." Another wrote, "She was an amazing woman, friend, and soul. Grateful for all your kindness in this lifetime." All but one of the victims lived on James Smith Cree Nation. The other, 77-year-old widower Wes Peterson, lived in nearby Weldon. He was at home with his grandson when the attack happened. Peterson, friends say, was a loving man, always there for his community.
And that community, Weldon, is where we are tonight. It's a village of just 200 people, all of them in mourning. So, Ellen, we've got so many victims. What more are we expecting to hear about those who are killed or injured?
Well, Adrienne, again, the community has asked for space, but we are expecting to hear directly from the families of 2 of the victims at a press conference tomorrow morning.
All right, Ellen Morrow, thank you. So this is the latest picture of Myles Sanderson, released by the RCMP tonight. As more details emerge about him, he has a rap sheet stretching back years, 59 criminal convictions, ranging from breaching orders and conditions to assault and robbery. As Katie Nicholson shows us, this is a life marked by volatility and violence, and that is raising questions about the system that released him.
Myles Sanderson's behavior was an open secret at James Smith Cree Nation.
Myles had a history of violence and possibly substance abuse.
Parole board documents reveal Sanderson struggled with alcohol and drug use early on, used cocaine at 14 and crystal meth in his 20s. And when he used, he would lose his mind. He stabbed men with forks, beat another unconscious in a ditch, and smashed property. And after serving 2/3 of his sentence, he was eligible for statutory release, meaning he could return to the community with conditions.
The data show that in over 98% of cases over the past 5 years, statutory release is completed without a new violent offense during that time period.
Statutory release is designed to help offenders reintegrate by giving them supports they need to prevent them from reoffending as they transition back into society. But not this time.
Of course, people want to know, how did this happen? And what do we need to change about our system in order to make sure it doesn't happen again?
In February, after Sanderson got into trouble for breaking release rules, the board decided to give him another chance, ruling, "It is the board's opinion that you will not present an undue risk to society." Within months, he breached conditions yet again and was at large.
We really need to see more transparency from this board to determine what standards and metrics were used for this individual's release.
This criminologist says it's too early to know where the system failed, but it will be important to examine the case closely.
This individual was a high risk to reoffend, or is a high risk to reoffend and clearly has offended. Certainly is an unfortunate, and it's a tragedy for the province, but it certainly speaks to some of the ongoing issues that we see with parole at the federal level.
And Katie, it looks like those issues are already getting some federal attention tonight.
Yeah, that's right. So tonight, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino told reporters he was assured that the parole board would be undertaking an investigation into the decision on Sanderson's statutory release. Mendicino said he is extremely concerned with what has happened here and that transparency will be key and that they need to make sure that the laws work. But that right now, his focus is on the trauma of the families. Adrienne?
Indeed. Thank you. Katie Nicholson in Toronto. Now, we'll have more coverage a little later tonight of the manhunt, the latest on what police are saying about the search, and insight from a former RCMP deputy commissioner. Now, 2 years after another mass killing, the emotions are still certainly raw and complicated in Nova Scotia. Tonight, Kayla Hounsell brings us some long-awaited testimony from a police officer who had visited the gunman more than a dozen times but didn't pick up any danger signs.
It was here on the gunman's Portapique property that a Nova Scotia RCMP officer paid him visits. First, around 2007 or 2008, when Gabriel Wortman complained about tools stolen from his garage. The officer went on to visit Wortman here approximately 16 times over multiple years, checking in with him for tips on crime in the area. But Constable Greg Wiley is adamant they were not friends. Anytime I ever stopped at his house in Portapique, I was in uniform, in a marked police vehicle, and I was on the clock, he told the Public Inquiry. We can't let you see and hear Wiley yourself because the Commission has granted him special accommodations due to personal health reasons.
Frankly, I find it outrageous, especially in terms of police accountability and transparency.
In 2010, Halifax Municipal Police got a call that Wortman had threatened to kill his parents and had weapons. The Halifax officer called the RCMP because Portapique is within its jurisdiction. He says Wiley told him he would check on the weapons. Wiley testified he doesn't remember that conversation or asking Wortman about guns, but Wortman's spouse does remember.
Gabriel had like a little musket kind of gun, and he showed him that, and then he showed him the gun above the fireplace that was filled with wax, so it was just for decoration, and he said, "That's what I have."
Wiley still says he doesn't remember.
His explanation seems to be that it wasn't important, or I don't remember, I don't have my notes, but what is confirmed is that nothing was done.
Wiley testified he didn't see any red flags when visiting Wortman. I know in retrospect, as everyone looks at this and sees what he has done, they probably think that I'm out of my mind. But at the time, the individual that I was dealing with was very level-headed, articulate, well-spoken, mannerly, seemed pro-police. He called it ironic how things turned out. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
It's been just one day on the job, but Britain's new Prime Minister is already making some big promises, vowing to tackle soaring energy prices and help Britain ride out its cost of living crisis. But as Chris Brown shows us, this is a tall order in an increasingly expensive place.
Boris Johnson's turbulent time as Prime Minister ended with cheers from staff and a classic Boris speech. Full of pithy metaphors and a hint of bitterness, he didn't get to finish his term.
The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now.
With that, he was off to Balmoral, Scotland, to hand in his resignation to the Queen. Minutes later, it was Liz Truss's turn for an audience, the 15th time the 96-year-old monarch has sworn in a new Prime Minister. Then, with cameras tracking her plane and her motorcade's trip to Downing Street, Truss managed to time a break in a rainstorm long enough to talk about her first steps.
I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm.
Energy costs are headed to the stratosphere with the tripling of bills from the spring. That's potentially catastrophic for small businesses, such as Harry Niazi's fish and chip shop.
Fish has increased, oil has increased, gas has increased, electricity has increased, everything's increased.
He won't jack up prices because he says consumers are also feeling the squeeze.
I'm hoping with our new Prime Minister, she will cap prices and we can all breathe a sigh of relief so we can focus on what we know best. I know fish and chips.
Truss initially talked about tax cuts as the best way to help consumers. Now it appears she's going to freeze bills and add $150 billion Canadian to the public debt to pay for it. Britain's government will now have a very different feel. Liz Truss lacks Boris Johnson's big personality and way with words, but supporters say she's honest and shouldn't be underestimated. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
With soaring prices and those rising interest rates, there is real concern over how a lot of Canadians are getting by.
I definitely have 2 credit cards that I go between when one is getting a little on the scary side.
Why experts are sounding the alarm over the amount of debt people are racking up. Plus, as kids go back to school, is it really back to normal?
I feel like that's something that we've been missing out on.
And we'll continue our coverage of the breaking news here in Saskatchewan. Where could the manhunt go next? The National is back in 2. Tonight, we are coming to you again from Saskatchewan, where a very urgent search continues for the man accused of killing so many people in this province. In just a few minutes, we'll get some insight into where the investigation could go next. But first, we want to turn to another important story. A new picture tonight of how Canadians are feeling the crunch of inflation and the extra price many are paying as they reach for their credit cards to cope. Nisha Patel explains.
Gas, groceries, back-to-school supplies. Prices have been climbing for months.
Clothes, food, lunch, everything costs money, a lot of money.
Now more Canadians are putting those purchases on credit cards, with balances hitting the highest level in 3 years.
I definitely have 2 credit cards that I go between when one is getting a little on the scary side.
I'm owing a lot of money. I'm owing a lot of money in the credit card.
On average, consumers are spending more than $2,300 a month using their credit cards. That's up 22% compared to the same time a year ago.
It's lots of people across all age groups, across a lot of different credit risk scores, across different regions.
As Canadians stayed close to home during the pandemic, debt levels sank and savings soared. Now, thanks to inflation, it's harder to make ends meet.
The challenge is credit card debt spirals. Every month you're paying 19%-ish interest on the balance. And it's really hard to keep up with that kind of level of payment.
And interest rates are marching higher. Many borrowers are paying more on their loans, leaving them even more strapped for cash. Experts say another factor eating away at budgets, paychecks for many workers just aren't keeping up with inflation.
The price of milk, beans, all the basics pasta, it's gone up. So I don't see employers giving us a cost of living raise of 8%. So we're basically dealing with a huge shortfall.
And while government aid kept debt down during the height of the pandemic, subsidies have dried up. Now personal bankruptcies are on the rise.
There is some significant financial stress coming through because obviously consumers don't tend to go insolvent unless they're in a really difficult situation.
A difficult situation that may continue until rampant inflation gets under control.
So, Nisha, those rising interest rates are something many Canadians are watching so carefully, and it seems yet again we're expecting another one tomorrow.
Adrienne, the big question is how much. The bank has already raised rates 4 times this year. Most experts predict a move that would take the key rate to 3.25%, trying to wrangle
Some breaking news unfolding here in Saskatchewan. So we know that Myles Sanderson, the man wanted after a rampage that left 11 people dead in this province, is still on the loose. So how does a manhunt of this magnitude play out? We'll get some insight from a former RCMP deputy commissioner next. So we have a major update tonight on the manhunt underway in Saskatchewan. Police in Regina say they now believe Myles Sanderson may no longer be in their city, though they're still looking for him there. Tonight, Regina's police chief laid out some of what's happening behind the scenes.
When we talk about investigative work that is being done, oftentimes it's not visible and easy work for you to spot. It doesn't mean extra uniformed police officers in patrol cars. While that is part of it, a lot of it has to do with specialized investigative units, tech crime investigators, and other specialized plainclothes investigators and analysts that are working to try and put pieces together that can help us solve this situation as quickly as possible.
Now, despite that work, police say it is still not clear where Myles Sanderson may be. They are urging anyone with information to come forward. So for more insight, we need some help here from former RCMP Deputy Commissioner P.Y. Bourdois. So P.Y., today it was thought Myles could have been at James Smith Cree Nation. It turned out he was not there. So what does that do to the investigation? What do you think is happening in the command post right now?
Well, the command post is the nerve center, if I may say, of what's happening, with regards to this information. As the Regina police chief indicated, there's a ton of information that is being gleaned from the general public. Investigators are out there meeting potential contacts that could potentially have been dealing with Myles Sanderson's in the past, and they're just trying to paint a picture as to the type of individual he is, what's his mindset, where's thinking of going, and this needs to happen sooner than later. What you also have to bear in mind is that these investigators need to meet with the analysts in order to get a clear sense as to where the investigation is going and the next steps that needs to also be taken.
So it doesn't look like there is a manhunt, to a lay person. We're not seeing a lot of checkpoints, not a very obvious presence, although we have seen some vehicles screaming by throughout the day. But I presume that doesn't mean it isn't happening.
Well, it's not happening up to a certain point visually to the general public. But what you have to bear in mind is that there needs to be focused enforcement. For instance, if there'd be a report in a particular region of the province of Saskatchewan, it stands to reason that then police would move in, cordon off the area to ensure that if it's a viable report, and it's anchored on solid information, then the RCMP and other law enforcement agency would deploy in order to ensure a peaceful, if at all possible, arrest of the main suspect.
When the Regina police said tonight that they're not in Regina, I think a lot of people here got very worried, thinking, is it possible they just hand on this? What do you think?
Well, the chief mentioned earlier, I think it was on Sunday, that of course, being back to school, and it was indicated earlier in your report that the general population are very concerned and afraid. Hence the reason why law enforcement agencies are trying their utmost to bring back, the communities where they need to be feeling safe again. But in the meantime, with someone with such an extensive criminal record, like the general population are concerned, rightfully so.
And are you surprised at all that there's no sign of a reward for information at this? Would you expect that at this point in the process?
Actually, no, Adrienne. And from the experience I've had with these types of investigations, police agencies rely on the goodwill of people. This is such a tragedy for not only the people of First Nation, but also for the people in Saskatchewan. So law enforcement agencies are relying on the goodwill of people that are paying attention. And if they see anything out of the ordinary, then they need to report it to the police so the police can act on these tips, because something so that wouldn't mean a whole lot could help police agencies put the final piece of the puzzle and hopefully move in and effect a peaceful arrest.
Yeah, they're desperate for that information. P.Y. Bourdois, thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Adrienne.
And please stay with CBC News and the National for the very latest on this story. It is moving quickly. Up next, though, we want to turn to Russia's war on Ukraine with some of the Ukrainians who've been forced to flee.
The refugees that are here, what route did they take to end up in Estonia?
Yeah, so many of them nowadays come through Russia.
When the path to safety runs right through enemy territory, right after the break. In Pakistan tonight, there is an urgent effort underway to stop one of the country's largest lakes from overflowing. Pakistan has been inundated by record monsoon rains, and now water from Lake Manchar threatens to spill into some densely populated cities. About 100,000 people in the region have been displaced so far, but authorities say many more are at risk if that lake bursts its banks. A third of Pakistan is already underwater. There are urgent calls tonight for Europe's largest nuclear plant to be put in a nuclear protection zone because it's on the front lines of a war. Susan Ormiston has the very latest.
Calling the situation at Zaporizhia nuclear plant unprecedented and untenable, the nuclear watchdog agency urged a nuclear safety and protection zone.
We are playing with fire, and something very, very catastrophic could take place.
Urgent measures, it warned the UN Security Council, to protect against a nuclear accident.
Let's seize this opportunity so fundamental for peace, for security, and to protect the populations of Ukraine and beyond.
Shelling since early August near the plant has damaged 6 different areas, some close to the reactor buildings, says the report, including a huge hole punched in the roof of a special building that houses fresh nuclear fuel. As recently as Saturday, shelling was so close, inspectors had to evacuate to the ground level of an admin building. Staffing is reduced, shifts are longer, and there's high stress and tension between Ukrainian workers and Russian controllers.
Any damage could spell catastrophe, not only for the immediate vicinity, but for the region and beyond.
But the UN has no power to mandate the zone. Russia has refused and claims even today that Ukraine is shelling. Ukraine's energy minister expressed frustration that no one can or will force a neutral zone.
I think that if the NPP is stayed in Russian control, I think that there is no results of the missions. I mean, we cannot implement everything they would recommend us to do. We cannot. I mean, physically, we cannot reach the station. We cannot come and do this.
So far, radiation levels have not budged above normal levels, but even today, an explosion nearby raised fresh concerns. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Mykolaiv, Ukraine.
Millions have fled Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And tonight we take you inside one emergency shelter to meet passengers on board the Isabel. That is a cruise ship that is housing Ukrainian refugees in the harbor of Estonia's capital city. Estonia shares a border with Russia, but the small Baltic nation is a very long journey from the front lines of the war in Ukraine. And as Briar Stewart shows us, for those escaping to Estonia, there's often little choice but to head directly through enemy territory to make it out alive.
Underneath this ring, a main patch of skin hints at what Igor has been through in the past 6 months. A steelworker from Mariupol who tried to burn off his tattoo of a Ukrainian trident. He was surrounded by the enemy, and that symbol could lead to his death.
How did you remove your tattoo?
Там стояли буржуйки, которыми отапливали бараки. Уголек оттуда взял и приложил.
Igor would only give us his first name. It's clear why. He and his family survived the siege of Mariupol and their attempts to escape it. This was the building where they used to live. It's where they hid in the basement before it was destroyed by the relentless barrage around them. 2 of his neighbors were killed.
Чудом с семьей остались живы. И потом еще неделю мы прятались в подвале соседнего дома с семьей.
By mid-March, they knew they had to get out. They tried to flee along with tens of thousands of others. But in a city surrounded by the Russian military, it meant going through their checkpoints. Igor said when soldiers saw that tattoo under his ring, he was sent to a filtration camp and separated from his family.
Никак не мог связаться, и даже они не знали, где я находился. Вот в течение этого месяца никак я не мог связаться с семьей.
It was in the camp where he tried to burn off his tattoo before even more soldiers saw it. He spent 30 days there sleeping on a wooden pallet on the floor. Today he's in a much better place. Igor and his family are safe, even if they're living in close quarters, staying on a cruise ship anchored in Tallinn, Estonia. It's serving as temporary accommodation for Ukrainian refugees.
So the refugees that are here, what route did they take to end up in Estonia?
Yeah, so many of them nowadays come through Russia.
Kirill Badecki is a crisis specialist working on this ship, trying to help refugees who not only fled a war, but had to escape through what many saw as enemy territory.
They've lost their homes, they lost their families, they are traumatized, of course, so we provide also the psychological help here on ship and in the information points as well where they arrive.
Officials estimate that around 2 million people have been forced to flee to Russia since the war began. In the days before the invasion, Russia evacuated women and children from Donetsk. In the weeks and months after, many from eastern Ukraine couldn't find a safe way out. Their only option, to get on buses and trains destined for all across Russia. The country has painted this as a humanitarian mission, while Ukraine sees it as a mass deportation of its citizens. Natalia and her daughter were among that group.
Мы бежали, уже у людей была паника. Люди переступали даже через трупы.
With bombs falling around them, Natalia and her 17-year-old daughter ran out of Mariupol in early March before finally getting on a bus to Russia. Today, she's 200 kilometers southeast of Moscow. While she agreed to be interviewed, most Ukrainian refugees in Russia are too terrified to speak publicly.
Есть такие, которые нас и ненавидят. Они это не скрывают. Есть те, которые готовы поделиться последним куском хлеба.
Back in Estonia, right along Russia's border, 22-year-old Dmitry has just crossed over into the EU. After he fled Ukraine, his family went to Moscow. His parents and younger brother are still there, but he couldn't handle being in Russia any longer.
Я сказал им, что уезжаю в Европу. Они сказали, ну, хорошо. Ну, я сел на автобус и уехал. Ну и все.
He's now sharing a room in a hostel with two families from Kherson. Before they fled through Crimea in August, they deleted pictures off their phones because they knew they would be searched.
Мы выехали через вражескую территорию. То есть мы тихонько спілкувалися не на українському.
For months, they hoped to stay in occupied Kherson, but the violence didn't stop. And now there are fears that it could soon ramp up even more as Ukraine tries to retake the region.
Мы надеялись, что все-таки что-то изменится к лучшему, а ничего не менялось.
Тяжело смотреть на ребенка маленького, который не может пойти на улицу, спокойно погулять на площадке, потому что каждый день мы с утра до вечера слушаем взрывы.
Once out of Ukraine, it only took the family a few days to reach Estonia. But for Igor and his family, their journey took weeks. Volunteers helped them get to the Estonian border, but Russian guards wouldn't let them out. He didn't have his passport. He never got it back from soldiers at the filtration camp. All they gave him was a photocopy with a stamp from the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, so the family headed back south, eventually crossing into Belarus, then driving north.
And how did it feel when you finally reached Estonia?
Хороший, вздохнул спокойно уже. Я уже думал, оттуда не вырвусь.
They made it to the EU, but the challenge now starting over. Finding a job and enrolling the children in school, all in a country where they don't speak the language.
Мы не расстраиваемся. Надеемся, все будет хорошо.
They aren't sure if they're ever going to be able to return to what was their home, but they're no longer trying to flee, and instead are focused on building a new life.
Briar, what more do we know about the people who fled through Russia?
Well, Adrienne, the experience was varied and it depended on when people left and how they left. But we do know that Ukrainian refugees were sent to 55 regions across Russia. And researchers with Human Rights Watch took a look at the whole screening process that was used by Russian soldiers. And they found that it was so invasive and punitive that it basically amounted to an illegal privacy search. You had people's phones being searched, their contacts being downloaded, fingerprints being taken. So not only was it a privacy breach now, but the researchers say for some of those refugees, it could have long-lasting implications.
Given that chaos, any sense as to how many Ukrainian refugees are still there?
No, there's not any public data on that, so it's hard to ascertain. But what we do know is that for some refugees, it may be hard to get out. You have some in very remote regions of Russia, and they may not know what their options are. And there are Russian volunteers that help to get refugees out with transportation and logistics. But all of those things are organized on social media. So if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, if they're not connected to the different platforms, it can be hard to get in touch with the right people to help you figure out just how to leave Russia.
All right, thank you. Briar Stewart in London.
You're welcome.
As of tonight, a lot of kids are either back to school or getting ready for the big day, but is it back to normal?
I want to join at least 3 extracurriculars. Yeah.
A look at the plan to return safely to the classroom on the 4th school year since the pandemic. Plus, tonight's moment is the exciting moment of the first day at school.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast Front Burner, allegations that a man who smuggled British teens into ISIS-controlled Syria was a double-agent spy working with Canadian intelligence. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I got my peaches out in Georgia. Oh yeah, shit. I get my weed from California.
So it seems Justin Bieber has canceled the rest of his world tour for his latest album, Justice. The reason? Ongoing medical issues. Bieber was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder earlier this summer, Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. It partially paralyzed his face. Justin Bieber says he is going to rest and recover, and he told his fans he'll be okay. So from the end of a world tour to the start of a new school year, families across Canada are balancing their hope with worries over COVID. This is the third September affected by the virus, and today kids in BC and most of Ontario returned to class with some of the lightest restrictions yet. Deanna Sumnak-Johnson gets some advice on how to handle the weeks ahead.
This first day of school looks a lot like it did 3 years ago. Masks no longer required. Cohorting gone. Sports and clubs fully back.
I want to join at least 3 extracurriculars. Yeah.
After more than 2 school years disrupted by the pandemic, many students have said they need to return to normal.
I mean, socializing normally, which sounds like normal, but I feel like that's something that we've been missing out on.
But for some families, this brings a mix of joy and anxiety. This BC father, who is immunocompromised, homeschooled his kids for the majority of the last 2 school years. They returned to class when the whole family was vaccinated and boosted, but now those extra safety measures are gone.
I would love to see ventilation as top priority. I'd love to see whatever we settle on as being the best. I think wearing masks is a smart choice, so I'd love to see that as well.
This BC doctor says her own children will be wearing N95 equivalent masks in school.
Masks work really well when everybody is masked. They still work when it's one-way masking, and if somebody were to come straight up to your face and be talking to you, that mask at least serves as some protection from their spittle.
Fewer than half of kids aged 5 to 11 have received 2 shots. This pediatrician says every family must find its own comfort level, but don't ignore the value of in-class learning.
The most important thing is that students have a real school experience. And I think what that means is be in person, be able to attend the extracurricular activities, have their sports, and so on and so forth.
The Toronto District School Board, the biggest in the country, heads back tomorrow. Last year, it went above and beyond provincial measures to mandate masking for kids as young as 4. This year, it too is leaving it up to the families to make that choice. Deanna Sumnak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
So while there are some worries surrounding the return to school, there's also hope from young students excited just to be back in the classroom. The thrill of back to school is our moment.
What's today, Lily?
First day of school.
And how old are you?
6 years old.
And what grade are you going into?
Grade 2.
Are we going to have a great day?
Yeah.
I just went into grade 5 today, and it's my first day. I was looking forward to seeing my old teacher again, seeing my old friends, and sitting down in my classroom and just talking about the wonderful things we all did during the summer vacation. But I always feel a bit bittersweet because I like school and I like vacation also. But sadly, they cannot coexist at the same time. So one has to go. So I'm looking forward to school, and I'm sad to see vacation go behind.
I'm going to a new school this year. I'm a bit nervous about it, but I'm excited to get to meet new people that I've never met before. And I think it's going to be really awesome.
What are you looking forward to?
Playing with my friends.
And what's your favorite thing about school?
Having recess.
Aha, Stefan, that is my kind of kid. I too was one of a recess loving kids. That is a national for September the 6th. Thank you for being with us. Have a good night.